Hello, we are live. Welcome everybody to the return of Duo Talk with myself, Marcin McAllister, and the wonderful
Matthew Cochran.
It's great to be back, and it's great to get the show started and up and running again. And we've got a lovely sort of series of autumnal and winter episodes coming up. We're going to cover a lot of topics that matter to ourselves a lot as guitarists and educators and composers in Matt's world, and performing artists, and then hopefully a lot of things that matter to you out there in the community, just like our topic today, which is all about tips and tricks and advice for when you return to guitar after a break. So we are just saying a big welcome to everybody that's out there watching on YouTube. And remember, you can comment, so you can easily post questions to us by way of comments, just like that. And we will check them as they come in, and we will do our best to answer your queries as we go. We've both got our guitars. I can see Matt's two guitars behind him. Yeah. Don't be playing them both at the same time.
Well, you don't know. I might
be showing off. And I've got mine. And we're actually going to share some things with you today. We're actually going to literally play some of the things that we use, some of these ideas that we have. So a warm welcome to you all, a warm welcome to the community, and we're just delighted to be back sharing some live discussion with you all again. So I'm going to hand over to Matt now, just to begin on this topic of tips for returning to the guitar after a break.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, this came out of two discussions that we had rather independently. One was you and me talking about just kind of a summer holiday. When do you like to take a break, and how long would you be willing to be away from the guitar? Usually I actually like to sort of keep writing time and practicing time sort of separate. And so I do actually take reasonably long breaks depending upon how the season goes. And then we've had this other kind of phenomenon, which is those of you who are watching at home have independently written to us about this topic, like, oh, I've had an injury, and how do I come back to the instrument? Or maybe you kind of fell out of love with a piece, or with a practice regimen or something like that, and you're wanting to come back to it. There's any number of reasons why we might want to take a break from the instrument, and then what do you do to come back? Because it's kind of tricky, isn't it?
It's really difficult. I mean, it's funny, like, you were just saying some of those reasons. We also had, I don't know about if you felt this, but in the pandemic, a lot of people picked their guitars up again.
Yeah.
So, daily life stopped and stuff like that. Everything went on hold. And a lot of people that had played in their youth, they got their guitars back in their hands, and they sort of thought, oh, I've got a bit of time now, so I can rekindle my love for the instrument. If, like you say, they'd fallen out of it for any reason. So, and some people probably jumped in too quick,
and therefore got some injuries.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, we're always going to be taking questions as we go through the evening. And if it maybe just helps us deal with maybe the first aspect of returning after a break, Phil has just jumped in. And maybe we should address this first, actually, because Phil's a regular on the show, which is great. Thank you very much for your question, Phil. And also, maybe it's the most important one to talk about right away, and sort of not get it out the way, but I think a lot of people will share Phil's question. So he said, looking forward to this, as are we. Any tips for returning after a long break due to injury? So what do you think about that one?
Yeah. So I would say the most important thing is to check for tension, dependent upon what your injury is. So maybe there's, if we're talking about a hand-related injury or a repetitive stress injury, one of the easiest things that you can do, and boy, is it a good purchase, is get yourself a good mirror, a good full-length mirror that you can play in front of, and watch yourself from as many different positions as you possibly can, and watch for any kind of tension. Just go kind of through a list of your body and where tension happens. It starts right in the neck. Actually, it kind of starts in the jaw. Now that I think about it, it sort of I actually have students put their tongue between their teeth when we find some jaw tension and actually play through material very slowly and quietly, just to check for little bits of tension. But the jaw is just the first thing that's more of an indicator of other areas of tension. Check shoulder tension, check for any kind of issues that might be happening in your wrists. Rethink your sitting position. Nothing that we do, nothing that we've learned, nothing that we've approached the guitar with is etched in stone. Our bodies are not designed to play the guitar. I'd like to think they are, but they just plain aren't. So if there is something that's causing you any kind of discomfort, any kind of tension, and you can't sort of and you can feel it after you've been playing for, say, 20 minutes or something like that, then I think it's worth a rethink.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And it's really interesting to hear you talk about like the tongue in between the teeth. Because Pavel Steidl, the great guitar player, great interpreter of everything, but especially, I think, everyone would agree, 19th century repertoire, he's such an expressive player, and he's always making so many sort of facial expressions that are linked to how he's feeling about the music as he plays. And when he teaches, I've seen him do this thing with the grape, where he gets a student to hold the grape between their top two teeth, so between their front teeth. And it's like you putting the tongue between the teeth, because it opens a smile and it opens up the mouth. So you're not clenching anymore. You're not crunching the teeth down and holding that tension in the jaw. And actually you're breathing better as well, because the air's coming in and going out. And I guess it's kind of like something slightly more active than a placebo, I guess, because there is a physical thing there, but it's the effect it's having on all of that upper tension. And I think, we don't have a mouthpiece or an embouchure that we hold, because we're not playing a wind or a brass instrument, and indeed we're not singing. So guitarists tend to get so much jaw clenching going on. I mean, I think I'm always in lessons saying, relax, smile, breathe as a student's playing, because it matters and they care about it, and it switches on that tension. So I couldn't agree with you more about where does it begin? Where does it start? And I think sometimes when the going gets tough in a piece, we grimace, we clench up a little bit in our jaw. That's where the reaction happens first. So trying to remain calm in the upper body is great. And of course, that's linked to the mind and linked to the thinking as well. So, I mean, I could not agree more. And like you say, being aware of where the tension and where the pain's coming from. Can I make one point just on fatigue as well? Because it's funny just now. I mean, part of what we're going to discuss is like getting back into teaching, because we have a summer where we're playing concerts and recording and doing things where we're playing for a purpose, and then teaching, you sort of have to get your fingers back because you're demonstrating or working through repertoire or helping solve problems with students and things. And that's kind of like where I find myself in a couple of weeks before going back to school. Really, I'm like, okay, let's get these fingers working again. But like on the topic of fatigue, like when you're working with students and they've not done something before, there's going to be a natural element of fatigue. Like if I said, okay, we've never lifted this level of this heavy weight before. We've lifted 5 kilograms less, but we've never lifted this one. You're unlikely to do it and be like, yeah, that had no impact. I was absolutely fine. Or if I said, okay, we're going to run 5 kilometers, but we've only been running 3, you're going to have a feeling of, oof, my hands are tired. And it's not sometimes to confuse a healthy tiredness and a healthy feeling of fatigue with, okay, this is my body telling me to never do this again and then stop. And then a return from a break becomes 2 days of activity and then, no, I'm never doing it again. I think you have to expect that calluses go soft. Your fingertips are not playing the guitar every day. So, you get that feedback from the fingers and the hands that's like, okay, I'm tired, and then that's when to take a break, rest the muscles, rest the fingers, and then come back with the enthusiasm that you've had to pick it up. But don't let that initial bit of fatigue put you off as well. That was another thing, you know.
And I would add that taking a break within your return from the break isn't a bad idea. That is to say, you know, one of the things that we're going to talk about is sort of setting up your space for success. But I think kind of having a concept of when and where you're going to practice.
Yeah.
And when you're not going to practice, and what you're going to do when you're not practicing. You know, I personally have a fairly, well, I would say kind of a militaristic rule about a 25-minute on, 5-minute off thing. If I've got a chunk of time that I'm going to be practicing. So in my case, I practice sort of in big chunks, with also a lot of breaks. So I like a long session in the morning, but it's always with a 5-minute break where I do nothing with my hands, no screens, no typing, no nothing.
Okay. So you don't stop playing and then you're like checking the phone or answering an email. It's actually 5 minutes of inactivity for the hands.
For me, yeah.
That's good. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people don't do that. I'm sure a lot of people think they're taking a break, but then they're just moving their hands onto doing something else.
That's the problem, is we think that we're giving ourselves a break, and you're probably giving your mind a break, which can be really helpful if you're thinking about phrasing, or if you're thinking about any number of musical gestures that you're considering. But I would say your hands are the things that are actually making this occur. And so giving your hands a break and really thinking about the level of activity that we have that's similar to guitar playing. I mean, I think using our phones, I think using screens is not dissimilar, or at least it's certainly not relaxing our hands, right? And so we are giving ourselves just a little bit more. We're putting ourselves in a little bit more danger of something repetitive, stress-wise, etc., if we don't give ourselves time within our practice.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I think I would be guilty of sometimes just running into the next thing, you know, and it is that idea that we're using our hands for such a fine motor skilled thing. You know, it's such a very careful process when we're playing and practicing. And then as soon as we stop, you know, we're not using another limb to do whatever it is. We're going straight to the same limb and using it for a different purpose. And you know, sometimes I think like there's no consciousness to the fingers. They're just doing what our brain's telling them to do, but they are learning all of, you know, it's a repetitive movement. So there's muscle memory, and then there's this idea of certain things happening over and over again. So I actually do. I'm going to integrate this idea of a period of actual rest for the hands. I think it's very, very important. I see Phil's just jumped in with good advice for a mirror. What Julian Bream did after his arm injury. I didn't know that actually, Phil, that's what Bream did after his arm injury, but it makes a lot of sense. I mean, like I've obviously visited Interlaken where Matthew teaches, and he's visited the Conservatoire here in Scotland where I teach, and every single room has a floor length mirror, like a full mirror. And I see the singers up at the mirror looking at how their body and how everything's working as they're singing. I see the wind players up checking if everything's in the right position all the time, and I see the guitar players checking to see if, like, you know, the hair looks good, you know, and you know what I mean. And so sometimes I have to set them the other way. I'm like, just look at the wall, you know, but it's there to be. It's there for okay, why is my elbow up here? Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, and we have such a strange perspective, you know, when we're sitting behind the instrument. This is probably the weirdest perspective ever, to try and in some way, you know, ascertain if your posture's correct, or if your body's in the right alignment, or if when you position shift you do something weird with the elbow and all that sort of thing. If you're just looking straight at a mirror, you're correcting all these things before you move to do anything else. So I mean, the mirror it's almost like it's a necessity of everyday practice for most other musicians, certainly classical musicians, and I'm sure jazz musicians and things do it as well. So the mirror is fantastic. Phil had a very specific just a bit of detail on his injury, which is really interesting, which is a left fourth finger injury, and I'm assuming, Phil, you're right-handed. So therefore, if you have, I feel it sometimes with my third, that we're turning the hand in all the time with the left, onto the fingerboard. So we're always turning the fingers round and in and putting the pressure inwards to the fingerboard. And if you have any injury to any finger, I think the pain of that can be sort of exacerbated when we make that move, when we do that pressure. So if you're returning from that kind of an injury, I would have no problem muting the guitar for a while. So maybe putting a sock in the guitar or something that mutes the strings and playing with a really light touch. So you're not actually trying to actually get any sound out the guitar. You're actually maybe just, hopefully you can hear that over the internet. But I'm literally just putting my finger onto the position it would normally be, but I'm not pushing down with any force. And of course you can play pieces like that if you want. You could play. You're going to hear my open strings, but yeah. So instead of you're going to hear, especially if you've muted the guitar with something, you're still getting the sensation of the fingertip meeting the string. You're still getting that little buzz as you pluck the string with the right hand. So you're getting that feeling of synchronization and sensitivity. But what you're not doing immediately is bending that fourth finger in to make contact and push into the fretboard. And that's where I think you'll start to feel any problems that you've had with the four fingers, the left hand four fingers turning in. So I mean, I hope that. So I would really advocate that, like playing without full pressure, and maybe even some of your practice session being like that. And then at the end, you take it out and you play for 5 minutes as you normally would, but you're not playing for 25. So that's just maybe a way of gently coming back.
And of course we don't. Phil, maybe you can tell us off screen at some point what the reason for the injury. There we go. Oh, perfect. Okay, this is great. This is kind of where I was going to head. So 100% agree with Matthew's suggestion there. And I would add this wonderful exercise that I stole from Norbert Kraft.
Oh yeah,
the legend.
Yeah,
he has this. I have no idea how much he uses this or not. I hope he isn't cringing that I'm even bringing this up. But he has this this idea of the sort of left hand walking that you see in pumping nylon, where you're doing like one finger at a time or two.
Oh yeah.
Norbert does this thing where he'll play a note, bring it just to the point of buzzing, let it buzz, and then bring it back. So let's see if I can even do this.
Oh yeah. There.
See that idea?
Are you then back in after the buzz?
And then you bring it back after the buzz. So start a note normally, bring it to a buzz, and go back with just enough pressure. And what that ideally trains you to do is only use the amount of pressure that is necessary to fret that note.
Okay, let's see if I can do it.
Yeah.
No.
Of course you can.
Okay, yeah. But it's much quicker than you. So I don't. You were very consistent every single time. You brought it to a buzz, and then I could hear you reactivate by pushing the pressure back in. What I was doing there was when I was releasing, it was over really quickly. Right. So I needed to get that pressure back on in the right way. So I'll need to take a bit of time with that.
Yeah, and that's the idea, is that you're training yourself to kind of. So at first you'll probably kill the sound.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And it feels a little bit different. Another thing, this is the thing that I realized when I was doing it, and this is back in my student days. It feels very different in different parts of the neck.
Yeah.
You know?
Different action.
And so that sort of indicates to me that it's you need a little bit more pressure in certain areas of the neck.
Yeah.
And a little less pressure in other areas of the neck. And so I think, and Phil, you're identifying the injury as over practice. Yep, absolutely. We all are at risk of that. Barring, that's a whole can of worms right there. And then squeezing too hard.
I've definitely got something for barring, which I'll show you now. But I think, this idea of knowing how much pressure is required and then getting rid of it, because I quite often find like a student will have a chord down and I'll be like, okay, only one of these notes actually now needs to ring on because of its note value. You can get rid of all these other notes. But there's a feeling of like, I've put all, say it's a 4-note chord, so we're using all of our 4 fingers to put it down. There's often a feeling of like, I've got them down and I worked so hard to get them down that I can't, and it's also like, if I take them off, they're all coming off. I'm not able to take off my 1, 3, and 4 and maintain the 2, which is maybe the note, say for example, the B in this chord. The B is the note that's supposed to stay down. Everything else can come off, but that B is still to ring. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. It's that sensitivity of fingertip control that I think is really important. And it's often a sign that like we're just putting far too much pressure on the guitar all the time, and it's a problem. But I've got an exercise. I'll share it with you. And hopefully it helps Phil, and hopefully it helps everybody about this idea of Barre. So with Barre, I think whenever we use it for the first time, it's in a piece, right? It's not like our teacher's like, okay, we're going to have that super fun Barre lesson now. You probably want to play, as we all do, and then there's a big rasgueado. And it's a full, gigantic Barre. Or we're playing something like, and the going's great, we're having a great time, everything's okay, it's all going to be fine. Actually, I sound quite good, I could maybe do this, it's all going to be okay. Oh no, I've got to put a Barre. Everything stops. So I always think like our first exposure to Barre is like way too difficult. It's like in the context of a piece we really like, and it's usually either a half Barre or in most cases a full Barre. So we go from like 0 to 100, like that, and also it then spoils the piece for us a little bit because we love the piece and we want to play the piece, so we keep forcing it. So I would never go to the gym, right? And I would go, what's the heaviest weight you've got? I'm going to go straight there and lift it. I would go, 5, 7.5, 10, 12, 15, and then I'd probably say that's enough. But like, these guys that keep going and they can go up, they do it incrementally, right? So this is the trick that I've got. I think it's quite a good one. So I actually, when I do this, I get people to do a tremolo in their right hand. So you're basically doing P-A-M-I in the right hand. You're doing a tremolo. You can do whatever you want, but I get them to do a tremolo because it's just another thing that the right hand can do that's a bit fun while you're focused on a Barre exercise with the left hand, and it's getting every finger to work. And I go to fret 5 and I do this. So I'm basically walking from 5th fret to 6th fret to 7th and then up to the A. And I'm not doing any Barre yet at all. My thumb is with the first note, the A, and then I'm going through the other fingers like that. So I do that for a while, and then I add a Barre of 2 strings. So my first finger goes from just fretting the note to now being behind the fret. And then the thumb stroke of the tremolo becomes a chord, which has to ring on all the way to the 4th finger, finishing the completion of the position. Yeah. So actually now I've gone from a single note to a Barre of 2 strings, and then I'm going to make it a Barre of 3, keeping the sustain. And because my fingers are remaining on the top string, they're on the top E string and the Barre is getting increasingly lower, it's the distance between the index and the 2 that obviously becomes quite acute when you do the full Barre. And you're wanting everything to sustain at that point. So we got to the 3rd half Barre, then we go 4, and I'm getting that lovely chord to ring on all the way to the end. And then here, that's a 6-string Barre. So that's the hardest Barre we'll do. And then I walk it back. 5.
Wow.
4. And then 3. So basically my finger's learning that it's not just put everything on and grimace and go for it, and I return to the single stroke. So I've gone from all the way down, keeping that distance and that separation, getting sustain with the Barre, because the Barre is usually able to add a chord, right, in the texture of a piece, and then you've got something else to do. So that exercise, when I see students do it, they're like, oh, wait a minute, it's an incremental process. I mean, you didn't just start playing appaiando really fast, you had to build that technique up. So that's a good one. Feel free to steal it, everybody.
Well, now, one of the questions that I had is, do you ever have tension in your other fingers as you're walking up?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, do you check for tension in your second finger? Do you check for tension in your third finger, etc.? Because I bet you discover certain tension in there, right?
Absolutely. What you also discover as well, if you see me moving about, I'm making my screen a bit more full so I can see it, is, you'll have, everybody has it, that maybe the 2 and the 3 do this and they sort of collapse. And this is a good example of an exercise where you can keep that daylight between all 4 fingers as you move down. Yep. And you can try and keep your Barre really parallel. So you start to realize that, okay, when you're doing like 4 strings, the 3 doesn't really want to it's not got the same mobility as when you were in line like that.
Farther away as you go.
Yes, you're building that relationship and that tension, between, and you're seeing how all the other fingers behave when one is doing such a demonstrative physical act as Barre, and it's like, if I'm going to do something with lots of bars in it, I will warm up with that exercise, because it's just me checking. It's like a calibration exercise, I guess I would call it. I'm like, is my Barre in order today? Is it going to behave how I want it to behave?
Oh, that's so much better than mine.
Oh, no. Well, it years.
well, I was just going to quote like certain excerpts. You know what I mean? So like the bar piece that just drives me up a tree, and of course I don't have it under my fingers at the moment. I don't remember it, but it's from the Benjamin Britten folk song arrangements, which are lovely. And there's one called Bonnie at Morn. And it's basically like just actually both Bonnie at Morn and the final song in that, which is The Killing of His Deer, which is just a straight bar, like it's just a bunch of fourths. It's horrible. Anyway, but it's, you have to use a bar across four strings and then some sort of slur. And I find that incredibly difficult. So I just play a little bit of that, which probably just simply exacerbates the problem. I like yours a lot better than mine. Yeah, but
I like this one because it's piece specific. I think that's really interesting, and I think it sort of plays into one thing that I thought would be useful for people, is that like, we spend way too much of our lives, if we want to be serious about an instrument and about playing, professionally, and a lot of people that are playing either want to be getting better at their instrument. So maybe a lot of students watching and listening to this, or people enrolled in school and they're doing exams and they're trying to increase their level at something, every year. And that goes to every player as well, semi-pro players, amateur, hobbyist players. I hate that word amateur because some of the best guitar players I've met are amateur guitar players, supposedly. But it's this idea that we want to improve, and we don't really improve by just playing. We improve in some ways by just playing, but it's a very slow process. And if we can be a little bit analytical and clever about how we practice, we can tend to make the gains and the jumps into improving and increasing our level, by doing it. And when you speak about, well, I go to a particular part of a piece, like there's a piece that sums up what's difficult about Barre for you. That to me is incredibly practical and pragmatic. So I used to have this thing, and I've still got them. They're up on a shelf here in the gallery, and they're cheat books. And it's basically a massive binder. I think it's bigger than A3. I don't know what it is. And it's basically like you open it up, and if I want to play a certain piece, it's got all the difficult bits of the piece. Like a scrapbook stuck to a big page. So it's like, so say someone said, okay, we want you to play, I don't know, Asturias, right? Because we're thinking about Barres. I would identify the 10 really difficult moments in Asturias, and I cut them out. I photocopy them, I cut them out, and then I stick them onto this page, and then I write Asturias on that page. So then if someone says, oh, you've got a gig next Tuesday and we want to hear Asturias, I don't go, yeah, okay, I better start practicing. Because I know this bit, and I've known that bit since I was 12. But so I don't really need to play that until probably Monday night, or Sunday. But there'll be a bit, maybe that chord, or there'll be a bit where there's a jump and I'll be coming back, and that's in the scrapbook. So what I'm kind of more doing is I'm working with excerpts, like an orchestral musician would. They do orchestral excerpt exams. So I've got excerpts of all the different difficult bits in particular pieces. And rather than spending my practice time playing the piece from beginning to end, and those difficult bits getting a little bit better each time, I go straight to those bits, get them up to the right tempo, and then I link them to the rest of the stuff, which I kind of know anyway,
Yeah. Well, now you're talking about time management, which I think is a really, really crucial aspect of practice, and it's a huge aspect of coming back. When I mean, in our own case, we're preparing for a record, and so some of the stuff that some of the stuff that we're going to record, we've actually played a few times before. We're fairly familiar with it. I know where I need to practice, and some of it we're going to discover when we have rehearsals for the record. What is the tough stuff? But you and I tend to communicate about what those difficult parts are. So before you even land in the States, we're going to know what we're going to be rehearsing, what we need to be working on. And you can do the exact same thing in kind of a micro sense with your own individual practice.
Absolutely.
Where are the excerpts that are going to be challenging? Where does your time need to go? And where, can you just do a check-in a couple of times a week, make sure everything is where it needs to be. Starting a piece, practicing a piece and playing it always from the beginning to the end is a horrible waste of time.
Yeah, it is.
And it's not really all that fun, to be honest. If you're playing it for, a crowd maybe, but I don't think that's the most enjoyable aspect of practice, because it doesn't focus on what matters in your practice, which is problem solving.
Exactly. And do you not think it sort of brings us into a trap, which is really easy to fall into, of making bad music early on in a process? So for example, if I didn't have the scrapbook idea, and I mean, sometimes I do the scrapbook in my mind. I don't literally. I needed the scrapbook when I was younger because I would be too excited and I would just get started playing the piece.
Sure.
And I would think, I'm going to practice for 8 hours today anyway, because all I do is think about the guitar. Not that I ever practice for 8 hours ever, but got obsessed with it, and I thought, I've got all the time in the world. Now I don't have all the time in the world, so I need to be so careful with the practice that I do. So again, being so strategic means that the difficult bits of the piece get up to the right level. Because if you play the piece through and then you hit those difficult corners, you're going to drop your tempo. You're suddenly not going to have any musical intention. You're probably not going to be looking at any of the annotations. So you're not going to be thinking about, is it mezzo forte? Is it mezzo piano? Does it come from a crescendo? Does it, all of that's out the window. And it's just I'm trying to hang on and play the notes.
Yeah.
So, if you're strategic, like you're saying, all this came from your idea of going to a piece. I think that's great, and these things can stay with us. They can become like I know I've got them. I've got things that I'll go, okay, that was transformative when I played that technically. So I go back to it, a decade later, and I go, okay, yeah, this is what I learned, and it reinforms how you now think about it technically, which is from a very different landscape. But I love this idea of actually using pieces, not just exercises, and like you said, communicating about it,
Yeah, for sure. And holding yourself accountable, I think you can do too. I mean, one of the little bullet points that I have here is like set up your space for success, but also set up your time for success. So in my case, I know that I've got just so many hours in my week that I can dedicate to writing.
Yeah.
So many hours in my week that I can dedicate to playing. And those two things in my mind are very, very, very different.
Yeah.
One needs to get onto a stage. One just needs to get out of my brain, onto a page. And so the mechanisms for those things are extremely different.
Yeah.
And so I like to plan my week based on whatever time I have and based on what the next performance or the next recording or whatever that is. And I will actually plan out several months in advance. These things can change. But once a week, I like to do a check-in on it. And I'll see, okay, well, what do I need to be working on? Okay, this is going to be a priority. This needs to have the most of my time. Maybe it's a difficult thing, or maybe it's just something that's kind of concentration intensive.
Yeah.
But then the other, and hold yourself to it. Like if you're planning a 25-minute session on this on a Monday, a Wednesday, and a Friday, make sure you keep a record of what it is that you've done, because you may come to the end of the week, or you may be in the middle of the week and discover, I don't need that much time. I don't need what will end up being about an hour and a half on this. Maybe I only need 45 minutes, and that's perfectly fine, and I can move on. Well, then you've saved yourself a little bit of time, and you've saved yourself a little bit of effort. And then, of course, the other thing is your space. Now, looking around, we can see both of us think a bit about our space. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So what does your space allow you to do?
Okay, my space.
Yeah. Sure.
I don't know. Yeah, well, it allows me to practice. It allows me some kind of focus and concentration, and it makes me feel very comfortable. So I'm like, okay, I'm here, and I can, I don't think about too many extraneous things when I'm up here. I'm like, okay, I can focus on the music. So I think it gives me, obviously all of my tools are around, so I have all the things I need, but
what
also,
are they?
Well, they are my guitar, a chair that's the right height, all the music that I need, strings, nail files, pencils, because I mark a lot of things down. I write a lot of things down. A heater, because it's Scotland. You can just put it on.
Yep.
Because it does get cold up here in the winter. But yeah, and also it's a nice space. Like, it's a space I enjoy being in, because it's conducive to making some nice music. Does that make sense?
Oh boy, does it ever. I hate this space to practice in. I only ever use this space for like content creation, or you and I have been in this space when we're doing editing. Very it feels very closed in. So when I practice or when I write, I actually go into another portion of this space where I can sort of see a little bit. There are windows. I feel a little bit more comfortable. And weirdly, if I'm just physically more comfortable, I find myself considerably more productive.
Yeah. That's interesting. So not necessarily snatching practice anywhere. It's actually your environment is really important. And that makes that, and it is for me too. I'm exactly the same. I actually get frustrated trying to work in other places.
Yeah.
So if I'm practicing, sometimes, for example, in the conservatoire after like I've been teaching, sometimes it works, sometimes it does work, but not about music, about probably just solely technique. Like I don't necessarily want to sit in that space. I wouldn't be as creative in my head as in this space. And I think like when you said something about communication, I was like, that's so interesting because, and I'm jumping back a little bit to come back to what you just said. So I hope you don't mind. But actually saying what's difficult, because what I find difficult is not sometimes what students find difficult, and what students find difficult isn't often what I find difficult. So it's like I could be like, God, this is really hard, this thing, so I'm going to make sure to take care of X, Y, and Z, these things, when imparting this information to the student. And then I look at the student's hands and they go, that's fine. And I'm like, oh my God, that took me months when I was doing that back in the day. Could we... And then they're stuck on another thing that I'm like, well, that's the most obvious solution ever, you know? And it's like, I think we're very good when we're like, I'm saying to you, wait a minute, I find this hard. How are we going to do this? Or if you've written something, I'm like, oh, I've spent ages figuring out this fingering. And then you're like, it's this. I wrote it like this. And I'm like, oh my God. Do you know what I mean? I've missed that. But it's true, you know?
Yeah.
And it's absolutely true. Also, these are very important. That's why I was picking up. Something to hold my guitar on my thigh so it doesn't slip, you know? So actually, and I mean, this sounds like a complete cop-out, but if I've gone to the conservatoire to teach and I've forgotten this, I will not stay in practice because I will just annoy myself.
You're kidding.
Back in. Yeah, I'll come home and practice because that is one of the most important things to me, because even with a footstool on concert trousers and stuff, my guitar would always slip. And even with my fancy support thing that I use, I saw a student of mine recently got a new one of these, and they've redone this bit to make it more rough, so it sticks more to your jeans or whatever. But I've got like the first iteration of this support, the first edition, and it's got a little bit of roughness to it, but it's too smooth and it slides around. So I've always got this, and so you're talking about being comfortable. If I don't have that bit of anti-slip mat, then it's game's off.
That's wild. You know, I had a student mention this just last week. We had a guest artist in, and she was getting ready to play, and she's starting to get the nerves in, and she had forgotten hers. Her slip pads, and I was like, oh, don't even worry about it, and because I don't use them, I don't think about. I mean, it just slips around. I don't worry about it. But actually, I feel kind of bad now because I sort of realized, well, if you wouldn't even want to play or practice without them, maybe I was a bit dismissive in this circumstance.
Well, I think it's like but when you play, you're using the footstool, and you've got the guitars. It's at your body, and you've kind of got it right in there. And I think like your posture is like the guitar. It's very centered. There it is. I've had lots of different sort of postures over the years. Like I've had higher angles, lower angles. I've used all sorts of different things. And just with my back, I've wanted to go to no footstool. But it's very interesting. Like I don't want to adjust the guitar too much. I want to move, but I want to move the guitar with me, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't want it moving off that left leg. And I think the thing with the footstool is it did create more of an angle to the leg. So the knee would be here, and then the thigh's going down towards the hip. So the guitar is naturally leaning back. But with a lot of the guitar supports, because you have both legs flat on the floor, both feet are flat, you're actually usually coming off, if you're lucky, a straight angle and sometimes a little dip towards your knees, which is why these things start to fall forward a little bit, you know? So yeah, no, I mean, it's like environment and things that I think it's really, really important to keep it. I mean, David Russell told me this story once that he had something in his trousers, like he had it like stuck in, like sewn in, a bit of like anti-slip stuff there so that the guitar wouldn't move. So it was obviously black, so it matched the concert trousers, and then it was there. So he didn't have to think about it, it was there. I've also seen guitarists with it stuck onto the side of the guitar.
Sure.
So if you take my support off, it's actually on the side of the guitar.
Right.
So therefore it won't move. But I mean, it's pretty important stuff in terms of just keeping your instruments grounded,
I have two takeaways from that. One being how profoundly different two people who play exactly the same instrument and are often playing exactly the same material on the same instrument can have, like what makes you comfortable to play, which is pretty darn important, and and knowing when it is that you're uncomfortable, and just how different each one of us can be from the other. And so being able to define those things for yourself, I think, is really important. And then the other one, this is certainly not the first time, and it will not be the last time that we mentioned David Russell and his sort of pragmatism and genius when it comes to how he even approaches the instrument, let alone his just bottomless musicality. But I love that he identified that as such a problem, as such a sort of thing that he deals with every time he walks out on stage. So he came up with a solution where he doesn't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's very clever, and I think that's exactly the way I would like to be as often as possible.
Yeah, and I always get surprised. Like this summer in Germany, he was at a festival that I was at, and he played a great concert as always. And we were in the bar afterwards having a beer, and he took his concert jacket off, and then he's got a full shirt on, like with not the sleeves rolled up. The sleeves are right down, but underneath the shirt, he still had the, one of the arm covers. I don't know what you call them.
Yeah.
For if you're wearing a short sleeve t-shirt, you don't want the guitar, your forearm to stick to the guitar. So he had one of them on underneath, and I was like, oh my god, that's an extra level of like trying to detract. And I mean, I'm sure he won't mind me, I hope not anyway, speaking, but like when I looked at his arm, obviously he practices all the time, and he's weighing down that lower bout of the guitar like we all are, and that's why some people go for the curved supports to make it not a sort of harsh angle of the side meeting the face of the guitar, and that putting in a line. And I think to violinists with the chin rest and sometimes the mark that they get, and I could see on David's arm, oh my god, it makes a mark. He practices so much, and he's practiced the guitar all of his life, that weight has left a mark there, and it's like that's just protecting. And it's just obviously because I sometimes feel like this is a good thing about practice, I sometimes lift my forearm off, and that might be a bit weird, but like, so sometimes not in this kind of like, sort of does my head in when I see people doing stuff like this all the time. It's like magic guitar music. Slightly, it's kind of a disease of some of my Southern European cousins. It's like, oh, can you hear the sound doing like magic now? I'm like, no, it sounded exactly like what it did when your nail left the string. But anyway, so like not this stuff, magic, but like lifting the arm off so that you're not pushing down. So you're not trapping that nerve anymore or putting that pressure down, because we can sit for ages with our arm pushing down the whole time. So for me, a gesture that makes sense is a gesture of release at the end, so you have a cadence and off it comes, and then you're back to playing something else, But so, I think that idea is very important. And it just occurred to me there when we were talking about the anti-slip stuff and Russell going to that degree. And then we see him in the summer and realizing, oh my gosh, that's me. You said it earlier on tonight. You said, we're not made to play this instrument. Like, we're not born to play it. Ergonomically, we're not right for this.
It's close.
So it can leave like its marks. It can take its toll. So getting the, thinking very specifically and very personally about those things, I think is fantastically useful for the longevity as well of playing the instrument too.
No question.
So can we catch up a little bit? We've got Phil's back, and he said,
yeah.
I used to use those anti-slip mats, but now I use some Klingon films that already have a rubber surface attached. I've seen those. They stay on the guitar permanently, which is amazing. For anybody who's not as obsessed with classical guitar as we are, it's not Star Trek Klingons. It's that's just the make, and they make these covers that go on the guitar, the front, so that you can't scratch them when you do rasgueado or if you do any percussive stuff, and they're quite common now. But I have seen that, and that's a great solution as well, and really good. And then tail dragger with just essential ergonomics, and it is. I totally agree. It's absolutely essential. So can I share another exercise?
Please.
Okay, cool. So this is a thing about, like, if you've not been playing for a while, and this is like oops, I've just bashed something, but this is like music, or counterintuitive, let's say. I don't start with my right hand. So I don't sit, I mean, I know a lot of people do start their warm-ups and they start everything with the right hand, and they'll start like, okay, stuff like this, playing open strings, doing some planting. I love that. That's fine. If I'm playing every day, I'll do maybe some Carlavaros. He's got some great studies, the Carlavaro right-hand studies. I just love them. I don't really like the diminished chord. You know, the sort
of a lot of diminished.
This kind of like, you know, I know it's Halloween month, but like that's a bit intense around the house. You know? So again, I might just mute and go through all of Carlavaro's right-hand formulas if I'm in a right-hand space. But if I haven't played for a couple of weeks, say I've been on holiday, or I've been like, I'm not going to play for a week or something like that, I won't make a sound with my right hand. And the psychological reason for that is, if I do, I just start playing because I've made the sound. And I think, like, imagine you were Pavarotti, which would just be a great thing to imagine. But imagine you were.
I'd be okay with that.
I know. And you had that voice in there and you were like, there it is. You would just keep going. You would just keep singing. Do you know what I mean? If you had that amazing sound, that ease, you would just keep going. So I think when we start to engage the sound, we also engage that wanderlust in the brain of like, oh, now I'm going to play my pieces. Now I'm going to work on this. Oh, now, and I'm off. And we've just literally picked up the guitar after not playing for a couple of weeks, and we're off and we're excited and we can't contain that enthusiasm. So it's painful at times because I do want to get stuck in, but I leave this hand alone. So I try and kind of sit it up here, and I'm like, I'm not gonna play with my right hand, and I'll do all touch and sensitivity, like calibration things, with the left hand, because one, I'm not getting carried away with the sound and then just forgetting about warming up and getting back into playing. I'm just on. And two, if I do, I'm definitely going to push too hard with this hand. And then we come back to Phil's problems earlier on with Barre and over pressing, which is just the sort of scourge of guitar players, you know? Yeah. So one of the things I like to do is, it's quite simple. I drop my arm to my side and then I bring it up to the guitar and I sort of see roughly where it comes. Like if I'm just curving my bicep up and I'm not extending out like this and I'm not squeezing in, I'm just sort of like bringing it up. And it usually goes to about 4 or 5, something like that. And then all I do is I tap across. So no right hand at all. And I just tap right across the guitar, up and down. I do it with every finger. And I'm trying to monitor the behavior of the other fingers as I do it. You know, I'm trying to see if anything's sticking up weird, you know, like this, or if anything else is filling up with tension. And I'm trying to make sure that my tip joint of my fingers, they don't collapse. They stay nice and true. And, you know, if I haven't played for a while, something like what just happened there will happen. I go between the two strings. I don't make that contact right on the fingertip, you know. And I guess if I can hear the sound of the fret, if I can hear the pitch, of the note. So if I can hear like, okay, there's a B, okay, there's an E, okay, there's an A, okay, there's a D, oh, there's a D, there's an F sharp, and there's a B, then I know I'm using enough pressure. If I'm not getting anything, then I'm not pushing down hard enough. And if I'm flying off the end of the fingerboard, I'm definitely putting too much down. And I'll do it with everything, you know, I'll do it with every finger. And it's multifaceted, the approach. It's shutting down the right hand so it doesn't get excited. I'll come to that. I can marry the right hand up with all these exercises. But it also it's quite meditative. It really focuses everything neurologically on just getting that note to work and making sure that that sound is there. And I find that a really useful tool because I'm much more on the fingertip, much more upright with the fingers as they come down, and I bring the right hand in later. And probably, to be honest, I'll start with 4 and 3. So I started there working from index. But this is another thing. I think our 1 and 2 are kind of warmed up. I think they're just kind of always warmed up.
Do you know what I mean? I'm pre-warmed up.
Even if I've had a 2-week break, because like you said earlier on, fingers and thumbs, we do a lot of other stuff, with our hands.
Yep.
But we don't do that much with 4 and 3.
Right.
And I think quite often we spend a lot of time with our exercises starting here. And actually we should be starting there, because these guys have kind of been doing something already today. These guys haven't,
I like that a lot.
Yeah. So it's slightly counterintuitive, because we just want to play our instrument, right? We just want to make a sound.
Yeah.
But actually I do the opposite, and I try and just think about the touch. Sometimes I close my eyes when I do it as well. So I'm just like, how is it feeling to make that contact with the fingerboard? How's that feeling?
Yeah. Well, I actually stick with the right hand, but I think the idea is basically the same, and because I'm pretty comfortable with the fact that I have absolutely no original ideas on the guitar. I'll actually tell you.
None of
this. I love to steal other people's ideas because they're always better than mine. And this is David Russell's. I don't know if he still uses this, or even if he ever did. This is just something that I saw him tell a student in a master class, and it was about tone production. And it's an incredibly simple and also wildly profound and difficult exercise to do. Which once again, the David Russell fan club, here we are.
Yeah, we need to have him on.
So we start in this position, yeah. So thumb on the 4th string, index on the 3rd, middle on the 2nd, and they're all in 1st.
Yep.
And all we're doing is we're checking our follow through. We're checking, we're pushing a little bit into a string, and we're releasing into the palm.
Yep.
We just listen to that sound. Where can we improve little bits of that sound? Now I'm noticing that I've got just the slightest little catch in my index finger.
Yeah.
So if I'm starting my day, and I do this every day. I certainly do it once a week because I put on a new set of nails every week. So I'll use, this is in my case, this is a 220 grit that will take off a little bit of surface area with my nails. Remember, I'm using false nails.
Yeah.
And then I use a little bit of sandpaper or whatever would sort of buff that out. And I'm going to go back to that string after having adjusted my nail a little bit. And I'm going to see if the problem still exists, not by playing a ton of notes, but rather by playing one single open string and letting the sound bloom and letting it go. Now, to me, that's solved the problem that I have, but I wasn't too crazy about that sound. And so now I'm going to adjust a little bit my tip joint. So if I soften my tip joint just a little bit, I'm going to feel a little bit more give.
It's warmer. Yeah.
Which will warm up the sound.
Nice.
Now, David suggested to this student in this one particular circumstance, remember, I don't know if he does this every day or what, but to me, it seemed like a brilliant thing. About 2 minutes a day per finger. So it's about an 8-minute cycle where you're going through each finger and you're essentially doing this thing where you're playing a note and listening to the note. Listening to it start and end or die out. You can do this with free stroke. You can do this with rest stroke. I personally don't use a lot of rest stroke, so I mostly do it with my free stroke. And it's a very kind of meditative exercise It helps you sort of focus your ears, but it also allows you to make little adjustments. And these are very little adjustments sometimes with the tips of our fingers. I think to me, that's an absolutely essential exercise for coming back to the instrument,
That's excellent. I mean, I probably would rush in too quickly myself and be guilty of not giving it the time, and it's also like, you need to, if you've not been playing for a couple of weeks, you've probably let your nails, or if not been playing for a year, say, you might not have any nails anymore. You might just be using a bit of fingertip to come back. You're needing that weight and balance training. You're needing to find out where that sits, where that string sits against the flesh and the nail, and how you release it. And I'm fascinated to think about the time involved with that process. Pardon me, because I think the time is the thing that we overlook. We want to rush, and a lot of what even the left-hand exercise and your right-hand exercises are all about pulling back from just getting carried away. Because if you go too quickly, you are going to find yourself not playing again for another bit of period of time. So this exercise that you showed is great because you're focusing the ear, which then focuses the brain, and then you fix what's going on in the finger. So it's all up here, it's all based on the sound and the feel, and then you're correcting the mistake, which is really useful. Because I don't know about you, but I see sometimes people just kind of playing the mistake over and over and over again. Like, the part of the behavior with the instrument is repetition. Yeah. And if you get that repetition wrong, or if you have a little gremlin in the mix, and you keep playing and playing and playing, you learn to accept that flaw, whether it's, the sound's not warm enough, or, that nail shape's not right, or, there's just something there that's not quite working. You learn to accept it. We're all, as human beings, I think, very adaptable. So we constantly, if something's not quite right, we'll get round it. Yeah. And that can also be problematic. So just taking that time, and it was, as you were speaking, Phil, I feel like you're almost, we should just invite you on, Phil. He talks about patience here. Yeah. It's patience. It takes time to recover, set realistic goals to avoid frustration, stop on any sign of pain, and beware of tension, and reset and relax. Well, I think that's all the stuff that we've been hitting on.
I can't improve on that.
Yeah, no, me neither. And I think this idea of realistic goals is really important. Like, there's no... It was funny, I was teaching a class the other day, and we were talking about like difficulty in music, and I was saying, well, you don't necessarily think on a piano that D is a harder note than C, or F is a harder note than E, or G sharp is a harder note than E flat, because they're all there, and you do the same thing to play them. Of course, in other octaves, some of them are further away, but essentially they're all kind of a level of parity in their difficulty. But on the guitar, some things are immeasurably harder than others. Like an open string is a very easy thing to play, and then fret 13 on the A string, jumping back to something. I mean, some things are just like, whoa, really difficult. And that's where the realism comes in, of like, understand the complexity of your instrument. Understand that there are some mountains that you don't climb until you're absolutely ready to climb them, And I think we're always guilty as guitar players of sort of thinking we can scale Everest a little bit too early on in the process, and we need to get the mechanics down first. So that setting realistic goals is great. Don't think that when you come back after a bit of time off, you're just going to pick up where you left off. You're just going to be able to get back in the saddle at that level. For me, it takes days of playing to be like, okay, yeah, I sort of feel like I'm back there, like I'm sort of getting something going again. When you did that open string exercise, you reminded me of Scott Tennant, funnily enough. So we've talked about like David Russell, there's a guitar hero, and Scott Tennant, another guitar hero of both of ours, I know. And he's a great video online where he talks about just that thing, say P, I, and M and A on the top four strings. But he talks about squeezing each finger to play them as a block chord, but try and get one note to come out louder than another. So say your M finger, say you wanted, if it was open strings, the B to be louder, you'd squeeze your M. Or if you wanted the top E, you'd squeeze your A more. So if we play the chord, we hear the A, or maybe the thumb. Yeah, it's coming out. I need to practice a bit more. There we go. But I need to also hold my hand in the right posture. But it's a really great idea about like sensitivity, you know, weight and balance all the time. I don't think you can overlook it. So I mean, that's maybe another stage of development of David's idea. But there's a great video which people will find on YouTube of tenon. I've got a really cool exercise to share, which is, and again, you said like there's no original exercises, and I totally agree. But this is one from, I think, an Austrian guitarist, Louise Walker. You ever heard of Louise Walker? Yeah, amazing. She's an amazing guitarist. And it was my old teacher, Alan. He gave me this book years ago, Taglica Training. So it's like daily training for guitarists, old German like text. It's really intense. And it had this exercise. I always go back to it. And it's basically a diminished exercise. So you're playing D sharp, F sharp, A, C natural, D sharp, F sharp. So you're just repeating that pattern. So you're kind of using the first position, and then you move it to the fourth, and then you move it to the seventh, then you're up at the 10th. So it goes all the way up, yeah? So you're 1 4 2 1 4 2. It's great for keeping the fourth finger in. And then you position shift. And you position shift by a 4th fret position. So you position shift the natural part of the hand. So it's great. So 1 starts to move up to 4, to 7, to 10, and then you descend down and you play it 1 fret at a time. So it's just sliding back with the 2 at the top, sliding down with the 1 at the bottom. So you sort of position shift and jumps on the way up. And then chromatically, really, on the way down. It's great. And I'm trying to minimize squeak on the bass by lifting. And of course, like once you that's not, you don't do that on day one. Do you know what I mean? But that's the great one that I go to. I know that if I can do that with my eyes closed, 4, 7, 10 fret at a time, which is kind of easy with the eyes closed. But the 4 fret gaps on the way up aren't. Then I know I'm at D sharp. You know? So I do it all the time, and it's like it's blind. It's like try and get it so that you're like, and then down, you know. And it's so good. It's so good. So that's me. Maybe after a couple of days, or maybe depending on how fast I'm wanting to try and get my chops back, I'll start with that exercise, and I'll start to think, okay, look away. How are my position shifts going? How am I jumping?
Yeah.
And cleanly, you know. So that's quite an advanced one. And I know that, like, you know, some people will be like, wait a minute, we don't want to injure ourselves right away getting back. But obviously, some of the things that you and I are having to warm up to play are pretty tough. And we need things that we can go to that are going to test us, you know, as much as they can. So that's one that I always go to, and I always come back to. I'm like, that helped me so much with knowing the environments, you know, knowing the different areas of the fingerboard and how the strings react and respond in the different areas. I'll know if my right hand's going early and I don't get there to the 4th fret with the shift or the 7th fret with the shift, this hand is behind that hand. So I'm having to sort of synchronize and slow things down. So it's a great way of me knowing, are my hands ready for something tougher yet, you know, or do I need to do a bit more work?
I would say another thing that I don't know that we've said this explicitly, but adapting these exercises to whatever your needs are, I think, is really, really important. You know, I have this conversation usually once a year. I have a student who's got something specific that they want to work on, that their repertoire is requiring them, and so we take and maybe assign an etude. But realizing you don't need 15 etudes to solve 15 problems. You can probably use 1 or 2 etudes or 1 or 2 pieces of literature to deal with whatever these types of problems are. You can just adapt the piece to whatever you need. A perfect example is let's say if we're talking about right-hand stuff, again, this was an Elliott Fisk thing, so it's going to get a little bit on the complicated side. But to illustrate adapting a piece to whatever your need is, I think this is a pretty good idea. So basically, it was about rasgueados, and Elliott can. I can't do this, but he certainly can, and other people certainly can too. Can play scales just using their extenders. So this is going to sound like absolute trash. So
what do you mean when you say extenders? Oh, out the way.
Yeah, pretty wild, right?
Yes. No, I've heard of this. Yeah,
and the argument is like, you can develop these muscles like you develop other muscles. Anyway, and again, we're getting kind of far away from what you do when you come back.
It's getting very serious.
But his adaptation was to use Villalobos Etude 1 just with the back of the nail. So, and this is, again, it's going to sound like trash, so don't roast me in the comments here, but it's like this kind of thing that you're doing. I'm just going to ape it. But let's say that you have it can be done.
You flick back with the thumb.
It's so hard, right?
So you do down with the thumb.
You only use like 2 fingers at a time. So you play high.
God, I feel like a beginner. I hate that.
It's pretty horrible, right? Well, sorry. Going back to the. Sorry, Elliot, if you're watching that, we completely love you, man. You can do things that we just can't do. But the idea is use Villalobos 1 for whatever reason you need. So let's say that thumb placement ends up being an issue, either in a piece or whatever. You can play that arpeggio just simply using your thumb.
Yeah.
And it's a fantastic.
Yeah.
And you can do that with every single finger, or you can do that with alternating fingers.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of ways that you can adapt any piece that you play, or any etude that you've already played 100 times, to whatever your needs are. There's no reason. Similarly, you can do, like, let's say Villalobos, like at the that could be a simple exercise.
Yeah. 2-3, 4-3. Yeah, exactly. Don't look for the optimal fingering for performance. Look for the fingering that's going to enhance the strength, or the fingers. When you did the extensor thing, which is just blowing my mind, actually.
Yeah.
It feels so rubbish when you try that. It's like.
I can't do it. I sound like trash. Yeah.
But I don't know if it was a flamenco guitarist as well. I don't know if it was someone that came to Scotland way back when Alan ran his Dundee festival, and there was somebody talked about playing scales and flicking out. So it's kind of hard to show people, but it's exactly what Matt was saying. You're playing with the front of the nail, so it sounds terrible. But every time we pluck, we're doing this, and we're bringing the finger back. So we're bringing it back from that position. And then, of course, we need it to do a quick return so that it's ready for the next stroke. Yeah. And practicing that way, I think physiologically that's great, because it's getting that return of speed back. So if we're maybe practicing our scales, and we're playing them with the front of the nail, it sounds terrible. So do this in the comfort of your own practice room with no one listening, not on YouTube, so that everybody on the planet Earth can hear it for all perpetuity. So, I mean, honestly, I've got a nice sound. But if you practice like this, I'm doing it with IA. It sounds terrible. When you come back after a while to playing the scale, I think you've got a quicker return. I think you've got reflex, you know, a bit more agility in the stroke.
Yeah, and I think that there's an argument for playing rasguiatos for that purpose, and you know, for kind of warming up. Again, I don't think the pattern matters so much. I just think that the essential exercise matters. Now, John, I'm not sure which exercise are we talking about. Was that yours, Matthew? The one with the
Louise Walker's, yeah. It might have been when John put that in, because I think, well, actually, he had a comment before about just like every string has its own tension, and I think that was referring to when we were talking about every note isn't just there to hit at the same level of difficulty.
Yes.
You know, it's really like some notes have just got a difficulty level of 10 and some notes have a difficulty level of 1 on the guitar. Yeah. And then he went on to say, where can I get this? And I think it was when I was doing a diminished exercise. That's by Louise Walker, who was a great, I believe, Austrian or German, I think Austrian guitarist. You can actually find some recordings of Louise Walker on YouTube, old recordings. In fact, we probably should do a duo talk on someone like Louise Walker or some of these fantastic pedagogical, you know, just they're not forgotten about. I mean, I've just played one of our exercises today in 2023, and I do very regularly. But you know, with the onset of some other more popular technical methodologies, some of those older players have been forgotten. And her daily training book is amazing. It's still in print. It was out of print for a while, but I know it's back in print, and it's got some great harmony lessons about triads and all keys. She steals, like Scott Tennant does, not steal. She borrows some of the things that have been around for a lot longer, some of the Lobet things, the same way that the Giuliani 120 are part of Pump and Nylon. So, you know, bringing things together that help us become a well-rounded guitar player. Yeah, and John's just confirmed, yes, the diminished ones. So,
great. Okay.
So I would say at this stage, if anybody's got a burning question out there, you know, about technique or about tips or tricks or anything that they want, now's the time, because we're just about an hour and a quarter in, and we won't be staying on for too much longer. So if anybody's got something that they haven't quite asked yet, go ahead, because we will do our best to answer it. It can be anything to do with tips and tricks and returning to the instrument. I've got one thing that I think could be quite interesting to share. Oh, that's very kind of John. Thank you very much too for watching. When we think of developing strength in the hands, and this is a good one when we've not played for a while, like everything's kind of dormant. It's not entropy, but we don't have the same muscle control and that same individual control. I really like to strengthen the left hand using slurs. I generally put a lot of slurs in my playing anyway, which is an aesthetic that I tend to enjoy, an aesthetic that would be, you know, shared with a lot of string players, like bowed string players, singers, not to pluck every single note, but to try and join notes together with kind of stronger and weaker emphasis and have a bit more of a lyrical sort of nature to them. I think slur works beautifully on the guitar, but it also has a secondary goal or gain, and that is that it builds strength in the left hand. If we practice our hammer-ons and we get them really working well, I've played one note in the right hand, but I've actually played two notes in the left hand, and the second note I've had to create entirely with the left hand in mind, doing all the work. So there are a huge amount of configurations you can do. And it can be pull-offs, so it can be... But the benefits and the goals that you get through slur practice for the left hand, for strength, for accuracy, are massive. So sometimes we have a tendency to go, okay, I better pluck everything. And I'm like, well, yeah, you can, or you can... Now, to be honest, technically, the second scale that I demonstrated was way more complex. Yeah. The first scale was... I plucked every note. The second scale was I plucked the first, hammer 2 to 4. I plucked this one, a 3-note slur, 1, 2, 4, E, F, G. Then I did a pull off, hammer on. That's me doing them all with the left hand.
Yeah.
And it's so good for building strength and confidence with your left hand, you know. And that's one thing I would always suggest is don't try and marry everything up. Don't try and synchronize everything. Allow this hand to be lyrical and take control of the slurs and it's the legatos. It's so good. So it's good for your ear as well as you're sort of musically thinking about what you're about to do.
Agreed.
That's another one I like. So we've got, somebody just telling us they enjoyed it very much, I believe. We've got, Hell, enjoyed listening very much. Very interesting. Thanks a lot. Well, we are indebted to you all for listening as well. I mean, Matt, have you got anything else before we kind of wrap up for tonight? I mean, we've done about 1 hour and 20 on all of the things that we like to consider and think about. Have you any more things that you want to drop for anybody? Or
so many things, but we have many more episodes at which we can do it. And what we want to get is, we want to continue is to have a conversation with you. So what are you dying to hear? You know, we've got a bunch of things that we're really excited to bring to you. You know, Matthew and I are going to be having conversations with our personal guitar heroes this season. This is really exciting. Of course, we're super stoked to share the process of recording Pale Blue Dot with you. We're going to hear from some of our friends from guitar societies, again, some follow-ups with conversations that we've been having. So if anything is just burning a topic that you'd like us to cover, or we really want to hear from you on what you want us to discuss. So please drop us some DMs. It'd be great, or in the comments. We keep on taking a peek at the comments from old episodes. So please share with us, and thank you for making these shows possible.
No, it's great to be back, and I totally second that. I mean, some of the episodes that we did in kind of like our first series, you know, about Bremen Williams, Ida Presti, La Goya, we talked about recording, we have panels on. We're going to do the same things. We're going to talk about some of the great performers, the great acts that have graced our instrument over the years, but we're happy to get down into the nitty-gritty like tonight of like technique and stuff like that. So you are the audience, and you are more than welcome to give us anything. There's recording tips. Well, Phil, there's a whole episode on recording tips where we have Drew Henderson and Nicholas Howman live on the episode. Two fantastic characters who discuss video recording, audio recording, techniques, tricks, all sorts of different things. But to be quite honest, we will revisit that topic because it was such a popular one that I think there's going to be another episode coming out about that. And as Matt said, we're going to be in Michigan again in just under a month really now, and we're going to be beginning the process of recording our first album together, and we will be setting up in the same space, fabulous microphones, great preamps, thinking about all the things we need to take care of in a recording session. So I'm sure we will visit some of that when I'm over in Michigan, and we're working together on that process because we want to share all the behind the scenes things that go on in making records. Well, thank you all very much again for joining us, and I hope those tips and tricks are useful to you all. I know that we are now back in the swing of it because I've got a whole album's worth of music to review.
Same with me.
I will be in touch with everybody very soon with the details of our next live stream, our next episode of Geo Talk. But for now, thank you all very much for listening and commenting and being part of tonight's show. And we will see you all again very soon. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.